Bless you. Wow, well, thank you so much, Governor Huckabee. What a phenomenal honor it is to have Governor Huckabee travel here today and to be with us throughout the district and to offer his support and even more than that, to offer his encouragement. And Mike has always had that gift of a Barnabas, an encourager in so many ways, and has been that encourager in my life and in Beth's life. And we're so thankful for he and Janet. And whatever anybody else says, I still believe that he would make an awesome president of the United States of America. And one of these days, we may still yet see. And I want to thank him for his wisdom. And I want to thank him for his insight that he's been willing to share as well. For those of you that have not had the privilege of meeting personally, may I just share with you that my name is Mark Harris, and I am a conservative Republican, and I am running for the North Carolina's 9th Congressional District to represent you. And ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say to you this afternoon as we gather here in this place, that you know as well as I do that few times in our nation's history have voters been so fed up with Washington, D.C. as they are right now. And it's really no wonder that they are fed up. Our national debt exceeds $19 trillion. Unfunded liabilities, over $120 trillion. It seems that we have no real plan to defeat ISIS. Agencies like the IRS and the EPA are grossly out of control. Obama's CARE's awful impact is being felt by small businesses all across America. It's being felt on our health care system, while high taxes are placing a burden on working families and businesses in middle-class America. You and I recognize that all of these things are going on. And what's even more challenging is when we stop and think about all of those things I just listed, we're seeing the very values and principles upon which we've stood being attacked from every single angle. You see, I'm convinced that what our nation needs most right now in its leaders are leaders of unquestionable character. I'm convinced that we need leaders with sound judgment that are not going to sway with a special interest. We need a new voice for the people of the 9th District. And with the lines redrawn, the opportunity is now here for there to be that new voice. And I'm talking about a voice that will stand up and fight for a balanced budget amendment. Amen. A voice who genuinely believes that a balanced budget, instead of the taxing and spending our next generation's future. I'm so blessed today to not only have Beth, my wife, here with me, but back there rocking that sweet little girl is my oldest sweet little girl, Laura, and our grandbaby who was born this past December. And I want to, and her husband, Jordan, who is seated right here on the other side of Governor Huckabee. And you know, when I look at them and I look at the young family and our other 2 children and their young families, I realize that we are seeming to elect people that don't seem to mind putting this debt on the backs of these young people and their future. And we need a voice that's going to be willing to rise up and say, not on my watch. We need a voice to say no to amnesty for illegal immigrants. We need a voice to repeal and replace Obamacare. We need a voice that's going to speak up for our family values that are under attack. I'm standing here before you today as a candidate for the 9th Congressional District. When we have a current representative of the 9th District who has voted to increase the debt ceiling not once but 2 times. And the last time he voted to increase the debt ceiling, he raised the debt ceiling by a massive $1.5 trillion and increased federal spending by $112 billion. He even voted for Obamacare that fast-tracks all deals made by the president. I recently was quoted in the paper of criticizing the current 9th District Congressman for voting in favor of the omnibus budget bill that included the funding for Planned Parenthood. Yeah. And his response was that, well, the bill included funding for our military. So he said, is Harris not for our military? Let me tell you something. That comment alone is the example of what's wrong with our representation in Congress. Ladies and gentlemen, the process is not an excuse. And lobbing outlandish hyperbole by saying and suggesting that I wouldn't support our military is just political gamesmanship that we see far too often by D.C. insiders. Let me tell you something. I recognize the very real threats that exist in this world. And I firmly support our military and our veterans for that matter. I believe in funding our military. And it is a basic core function of government. And we have to ensure that the Department of Defense is adequately funded in order to protect our nation and its interests. However, please hear me. Omnibus bills are very dangerous things. Listen, in my vocabulary, the word omnibus and comprehensive in the context of Congress are considered cuss words. Why? Because Planned Parenthood funding simply should not be handcuffed to Department of Defense spending. Plain and simple. And what we need are leaders who will stand up against this culture in Washington and not only stand up, but speak up as we do. Listen, if people keep trying to feed us this, well, Mark, we're just living in the new normal for America. Those two words ought to make us shake in our boots. New normal.
Wow.
I would tell you that we ought to reject that premise at every turn. And if D.C. insiders keep telling us, well, voters, you just don't understand the process. Or, Mark, you don't understand how the process works. I tell you, we must reject that at every single turn as well. My pledge to you is that if you will allow me the honor and privilege of representing you in the 9th Congressional District, I will be a voice for a strong national security that's going to ensure our nation's safety against terrorism. I commit to you that I will fight for a balanced budget amendment to our Constitution. I promise you that I will say no to Common Core and yes to more local control of our schools. I will be a voice of our shared conservative values, and I will not trade political gamesmanship for real substantive solutions. You see, I think if you're ever going to really understand where I want to go, you've got to understand where I come from. And the best way I can remind you of that is to simply tell you who my hero is. See, if anybody asks me, Mark, who's your hero? Boy, I can answer that in less than 3 seconds. My hero is my daddy. Well, why is your daddy your hero? Because my daddy is the epitome of an overcomer. My daddy's my hero because at the age of 6, his mama died with cancer. His dad was a drunk, couldn't take care of him, dropped him off at an aunt's house in High Point, North Carolina, and she quickly realized that she couldn't take care of and raise a 6-year-old boy, so she dropped my daddy off at the Methodist Children's Home on Rinalda Road in Winston-Salem. My daddy grew up at that orphanage, and I will be forever grateful to the United Methodist Church for raising my daddy. But you know, my daddy came out of that children's home when he graduated high school not bitter, but better. Amen. He immediately went into World War II. My daddy was a waist gunner on a B-17 plane. He had flown 8 missions successfully and had taken off on that 9th bombing raid on November 2nd, 1944. They were successful in taking out some oil refineries there in Europe, and they were on their way back to the base in England when over Holland my dad's plane was shot down. 9 men bailed out of that plane as it went down. 1 of them perished. My dad and 7 others were immediately captured and placed in a Nazi German prison camp where he would spend the duration of the war. My daddy was marched 700 miles in a death march. In fact, the last 10 years of his life, he was bedridden and confined to a wheelchair because of neuropathy that the VA said was due to the fact of the extreme temperatures and exposure that he faced during even those days of World War II. But you know, my daddy came out of that Nazi German prison camp. He came back from World War II. He fell in love with my mama in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. She went to Meredith. He went to NC State on the GI Bill. They got married. They started a family. And I'm the baby of 5 that they had. My mom passed away in October of 2012. Had she lived till December, Mom and Dad would have been married for 65 years. That's what I come from. That's the kind of stock that I was raised with. I'll never forget in 2013 when I was considered going into the U.S. Senate race. I went by my home in Winston-Salem to visit my dad. He was in the bed, and I remember saying, you know, Dad, I'm seriously about to take a step, and I'd like to know your thoughts. I explained to him about getting into that race. And you know, my daddy looked at me, a man of few words at that point in his life, and he just simply said this. He said, son, just be careful. I said, seriously, Dad? You would have the audacity to say to me, be careful? After everything that you sacrificed, everything you lived through, everything you experienced for me and my brothers and sisters, for 12 grandchildren that you have helped and your great-grandchildren that you now have, you would say to me, be careful? No, Dad, don't you get it? Your generation is called the greatest generation because your generation understood something mine's missed. Your generation was able to look at America from that 30,000-foot view, and you were able to see an America where everybody had to stand shoulder to shoulder. Everybody had to lock arm in arm, and we had to work together for what was best for the whole. I said, Dad, it's my generation that's dropped the ball. It's our generation that's become so focused on ourselves that somehow we have forgotten the nation that you fought and bled for.
That's right.
No, Dad, I can't be careful. Because one day I want my children and grandchildren to be able to look at me the way I look at you. And I want them to know that when the chips were down and when the nation was coming apart at the seams, their dad wasn't willing to just do what was most comfortable. He was willing to step into the arena, and he was willing to fight for the principles and the truth that we have. Can I tell you something? Nobody questions my commitment to the military. When I look at my dad and understand the sacrifice that hangs on the wall in my home, and I see it every single morning. My dad passed away just 2 weeks before the primary in 2014. I say to you today that I would be honored to earn your support and your vote on June 7th. But I want you to understand, friends, I need your help. Governor Huckabee explained it so clearly. It's going to be a low turnout. I got to tell you, we've been working for several weeks now. We've been going door to door. We have teams of people here that have been working door to door. We've been making phone calls. And you know what I've found in just about every group I've spoken to, every door I've knocked on, every phone call I've made? I've yet to find one person who knew there was an election on June 7th. And when you tell them that they're voting for Congress, they want to argue with me that they already voted on March 15th for Congress. And they did. Nobody bothered to tell them those votes didn't count because there were new districts. I'm telling you that if you and I will make a commitment to get our friends and our neighbors mobilized, if we will make a commitment to speak to our Sunday school classes and speak to our friends at church and speak to our community friends all throughout our neighborhoods, I promise you every single vote in this election will count.
Amen.
And I need your help to make it happen. I stand before you today as a very blessed man. I stand before you today as a man who loves this nation, and I want to join you in standing arm in arm and shoulder to shoulder, believing that our best days are still ahead.
Amen.
God bless you, and may God bless America. Thank you. And thank you, Governor Huckabee, for coming and sharing with us.